Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And we are joined today by an experienced, published novelist. Her name is Joanna Hershon. Is that correct?
Hershon. Mm-hmm.
Hershon.
Either one's okay.
Well, I like Hershon.
Then use that.
Joanna Hershon is with us. She's written a new novel, her fourth one, and it is called A Dual Inheritance. And the publisher is Ballantine Books. Welcome.
I'm nice so happy to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you with us. The other four books, your publisher says, are different from this one. This one kind of is set aside. Do you think they're right, and in what way is this different from your previous writings?
I do think that's true. This book definitely has a broader scope than my other three books, and a broader cast of characters and a broader scope of time. And it does address more overtly political and sociological issues than my other books have addressed.
The other book's titles, which is what I was looking for as I was fumbling over here. The previous books are The German Bride, The Outside of August, and Swimming.
Yes.
What titles? What titles?
I pride myself on my titles. I like my titles.
Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Now, this is a departure in terms of scope, in terms of number of characters, locales, and all that kind of stuff. And in many ways, of course, the book is focused on two men, Ed Kantowitz and Hugh Shipley, both students at Harvard when we meet them in their senior year, I think. And some would say that, however, despite their centrality to the story, that the pivotal character in the book is a woman.
That's an interesting take. No one has ever said that before.
That's the way I see it. Her name is Helen Ordway.
Yes.
And what kind of woman is she, would you say?
I would say Helen is that woman who is always just out of reach in terms of your own comprehension, your own read on her. She's elusive, but she's also extremely vulnerable. And it's that vulnerability.
Which she doesn't present initially.
Not initially.
No, she's always dressed to the nines, it seems, and seems always to be in charge.
She's cool. She's, she on the surface is cool and has it together and comes from the right family and looks a certain way. But as we get to know her, it becomes quite clear that she's far more complicated than she presents and extremely vulnerable.
Extremely, yes, extremely vulnerable.
And that vulnerability actually is, I think, what really attracts people to her.
Yeah, she's from the Boston Brahmin department here, as far as the characters are concerned. And so she seems to be, with respect to men, subservient. But again, as you get to know her, that isn't true either, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm always really interested in how in appearances and what's behind things, and how there usually isn't one truth in terms of a power dynamic in a relationship. You know, we might think, oh, that woman is subservient to that man, but in fact, he's completely dependent on her. What's really going on?
Yeah, and one of the ways you let us know what's going on in her relationship with her husband is to have the child in the family talk to us about what she sees and hears and feels. And it's a very interesting way to do that.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested in generational storytelling. Where you get a more complete picture of people through their children.
That's what they said they did, but here's what really happened. Thank you very much, Rebecca. The book takes us to so many different places, to Africa, Haiti, New York City, of course, Harvard, Cambridge. The place that I like the best, or I have the most enjoyment, I guess is the way to put it, is it Fisher Island?
Fisher's
Island.
But with no apostrophe.
Oh, that's right, because it's like a class, isn't it? The Fishers.
Oh, right.
And many interesting things happen there. It's a summering place, and where people with lots and lots of money and history go to take it easy. But when they're taking it easy, they're not really taking it easy. And the proof of that is how they serve ketchup. Tell us how they serve ketchup on Fisher Island in your story.
Great. That's so funny. I'll be reading that scene tonight, actually, at Book Passage. But that's my favorite scene to read, so it's funny you zeroed in on that. They serve ketchup in a little silver bowl with an accompanying tiny spoon.
Yeah, with the spoon. I mean, with a bowl, you could, like, pour it on your hamburger, but no, spoon it very, very carefully. You know, in many ways, a dual inheritance is simply unforgettable. Think I'm exaggerating? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Yes, and Joanna Hershon is our guest. Her new novel is A Dual Inheritance, published by Ballantine Books. And the author of Something Red, Jennifer Gilmore by name, says this in part about this book. A dual inheritance is deep and beautifully humane. It has a massive scope and a social conscience, and yet it is also incredibly intimate. What an accomplished novel it is. It truly took my breath away. I don't know if it took my breath away, but I think she's right on target when she says it's incredibly intimate, which surprised me when I was looking over the publisher's notes, and you're going to go here and you're going to go there, and it's Wall Street scandal and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, God, this is almost like a historical novel, but it's not. It's a novel that gets you or gets you to understand relationships at a very intimate level.
Thank you.
And I think that's quite amazing, given every place you're jumping us around to.
I do jump you around. I do.
One of the places you jump us around to is Ethiopia. And it's that time when Hugh is in Ethiopia that I'd like you to read part of for us.
I would love to. I should say the time is 1963, which is important.
Yes.
And Hugh has come to Ethiopia with his mentor, who's an anthropological filmmaker. And he's on this extremely remote film shoot, and he's assisting this man, Charlie Case, who's making a film about the Nuer tribe.
Right.
And I'll begin reading.
Please.
There was the child, afflicted with not only the blistery horror of severe smallpox, for which photographs had not prepared him, but also other horrors. Pneumonia? What would Ed do? It came crashing forth, and though the thought was unquestionably irritating, because where was Ed? Where? Working for his future father-in-law, that was where. It also helped. Because Ed wouldn't have been ashamed, Ed wouldn't have been encumbered by doubt, and there was the child being literally thrust into Hugh's arms, and nobody, suddenly not even Hugh, cared about his qualifications. With his fingers shaking, Hugh called out for Charlie, who was nowhere to be seen. He called out for Neil and Etienne. He was the one with so little knowledge, and of course they'd come to him. He was finally beginning to understand that through no design whatsoever, his appearance, relativism, here was further proof of its stupidity, telegraphed strength to complete strangers. He took out the syringe he used to blast air at his camera lens and quickly filled it with water. "Don't worry," he was saying idiotically over and over as the parents stared at him, pale dung ash clinging to their frightened faces. He alternated between chanting, "Don't worry," and shouting, "Charlie!" But he also managed to tear open the packets from his kit and force sugar and salt into the boy's blistered mouth. Hugh held this boy's head in his hands. His hair was bristly. His skin was no softer than the cracked desert floor, but the eyes sunken between swollen eyelids were pools of the warmest brown. Hugh looked into those eyes and didn't look away. He worked quicker. "Charlie!" he cried, as the child convulsed right in his hands, coughing and coughing like a dying old beast, as Hugh somehow managed to shoot the child's arm full of penicillin after previously practicing only a handful of times on overripe bananas, just in case. This did nothing, as he knew it would do nothing. Even if it worked, the effect wouldn't be immediate. But even as he scrambled to do anything, right then he would have done anything. He called out for Charlie, as if Charlie could do something he couldn't. Hugh looked at the boy's parents. They looked back without much expression, including reproach, before taking the boy back to their home.
They looked back, and then they took the boy to his home. And that's like, you did nothing. You did nothing. You're here. You believe that this is your life. This is your career. And here he is trying to help, and he does nothing. It's powerful to me. It's so real. And, our expectations of what we can do and the changes we can make. Mm-hmm. And when you come right down to it, sometimes you can do pitiful little.
It's true. There is a big conflict that comes from this between he and his mentor.
Yeah. One of the other things I thought of when you were reading, and I didn't think about it before, is his friend Ed Kantowitz. When he's thinking of him as he's trying to help these people, Ed wouldn't hesitate. Mm-hmm. Ed would do everything right away, quick, and do it right. Mm-hmm. And as the novel goes on, that becomes less and less true. And that's another, part of understanding in an intimate way the characters that you've created. Now, who is this Charlie? Who is that?
Well, Charlie is Hugh's mentor. I mean, Charlie is an enormous part of the novel. He does change Hugh's life in the sense that he is that person at college who finally gets Hugh to wake up and have an interest in something. He's the guy that Guy, who's somebody's father, says prevents him from doing what every graduate should do: get a job. Oh, right. Yeah.
Charlie. One of the things that a dual inheritance does, of course, is focus on friendship. And I want to touch on that aspect of the book when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
That is I. Our guest today is Joanna Hershon. Her new novel, number 4, is A Dual Inheritance, published by Ballantine Books. And Joanna tells me that the author of one of her favorite recent books, one Jennifer Egan, has some nice things to say, like A Dual Inheritance is a big, captivating, multi-generational sweep of a romance, ranging from Africa to China to New England to New England's blue-blooded enclaves. Mm-hmm. With deftness and swagger, Joanna Hershon spins the intertwinement. What a word. She must have made that up herself. I have not used it recently. spins the intertwinement of two Harvard men's lives into a searching exploration of class and destiny in late 20th century America. So saith Jennifer Egan. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Now, one of the things that I tried to figure out was the title. Where does that come from?
Well, this title has a personal interesting story. I mean, just in that I love titling work, and it's usually comes after I've completed a book or a story.
Yes, and you come up with titles like The German Bride,
yes,
The Outside of August, and Swimming.
That's right.
And The Outside of August, folks, will have a sequel. You know what the title is. The Inside. Nah, never mind. Okay, now how did this title come about?
This title came about because I could not find a title. Could not. And it was extremely, it was becoming a little bit alarming because usually it really does come to me. And I asked my dear friend, who's a great reader and of mine and has great advice for me. And she read the book, and she is a great titler. And she wrote a list of titles, just top of her head titles. And I didn't like any of them, except I loved A Dual Inheritance. And I said, that's it. That's the title. That's perfect. That's exactly what the book is about. And then, because we live in this age of Google, I immediately Googled A Dual Inheritance to see if there was another book by that name or if there were any negative associations. And in fact, the only thing that came up was an anthropological theory that came about in the late 70s and early 80s called dual inheritance theory. And it was fascinating to me because I had been looking for a title with anthropological connotations.
Interesting. Because of the main character's pursuits.
One of the main character's pursuits. And also, I really do believe at the end of the day, this is a novel about tribes and about whether or not we can transcend our tribe of origin. In a way, I do feel like that's what it's about. So I really wanted a title that had some anthropology connotations, but couldn't, and had actually looked for anthropological theories as titles, but couldn't find one. So this one, it's also known as gene culture coevolution. And it basically explains how human behavior is a product of two different and interacting evolutionary processes, genetic and cultural evolution. And in a way, that's an incredibly clinical and dry way to explain.
Sounds dry to me. Yeah.
Super dry. And I'm certainly not an academic or an anthropologist. And it, in a way, it's my novel really traces this question of can you transcend your tribe and move into another one. The other
thing it does is I think dual refers to something else that's going on in the book, and that is the disparate backgrounds of two main characters, right, the two men, and how that background creates a life. And it's very, very different because of who they are. Their backgrounds are dual.
It creates a life, but it also creates a springboard. So it creates how someone responds to their background is just as important in some ways as the background. So, let's say Hugh is from this.
Right.
Hugh is from this incredibly wealthy, important, blue-blooded background, but he's very much chafing at that background, and that struggle and that fight is kind of what defines him as a character.
And the fact that he's chafing at that background explains at least somewhat why the Brahmin would even consider having a Jew for a friend.
Exactly. And being drawn to him. He's very much an outsider. And I've always been fascinated by not only outsiders, but insiders who feel like outsiders. And I've met enough people that I would explain that way that I think it's a real phenomenon. And people who, by all accounts, look the part and are from a certain place, and you'd think, oh boy, they haven't made, or they really just really shouldn't have any challenges in this world, and yet their insides don't match their outsides. They don't actually feel at home at all in the world.
Yeah, when you pull them aside, you find that out.
Yeah, and there are plenty of people like that. So
they're
I think
fearful, they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, there are many things.
Yeah.
So that insider-outsider phenomenon is one that fascinates me.
Behind a novel of this scope and variety has got to be a heck of a lot of research.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Did you go to Haiti? Did you go to Ethiopia?
No, that's always the question. Well, let me just say first that I feel like it's what's interested me as a writer, just in looking at my books and the development, is my first two novels are very much modern, contemporary psychological family novels. And then my last novel takes place in the 19th century, and that was incredibly research heavy. And I think it's made me a researcher, and it's hard for me to write now without the challenge of learning.
Oh, how interesting.
Huge amounts of material.
You've had a conversion.
I have had a conversion, and I feel like in some way it's freed me and changed my style.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Do you find it fun?
And it is. It's challenging. I mean, there's a chapter here that takes place in China, for instance, in the 1980s that was very challenging to write, but so ultimately satisfying.
Usually I don't use these questions that they send me, but there's one on this sheet that I find fascinating, and we only have about 30 seconds.
Okay.
How a change of scene from New York to Baja played a key role in your career. That's what it says here.
Change of scene. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not making it up.
No, I know it's true. It's true. I was wondering what sheet that's on. But it is true. I had started my first novel, and I was in graduate school, and I went to the wedding of a friend of mine and met my husband, who was living in Baja at the time, in a pretty remote area. And I ended up getting swept up and going to move there for a while, and ended up getting hyper-focused.
That takes care of that background question. A Dual Inheritance. That's the novel we've been talking about. Joanna Hershon has been good enough to stop by and talk about it with us. It's a wonderful read, as they say. Don't miss it. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.